Hey guys, I'm gonna just jump right into it here. We have to go live at some point. I have a department meeting today that's going to ask us if we can do this live, and I think so. I'm going to send you a link to a program called WebEx. You don't have to download anything; you just have to participate. And I think it's going to be a lot easier than putting these up, and we don't have time to talk, and there's a lot of questions, a lot of emails, so we're going to do our best to get it over with. And I don't know how long of a video you guys feel comfortable watching. The last one I made for Bio 1 was 27 minutes. And though it was a good job of teaching it, it's tough to just watch that and not participate. So we're going to see if we can do this live eventually. All right. As for this one, plants. They didn't start out on land. They had to move their way onto land after they obviously got close to that land, growing in the shallow waters, right? So if you look, and I left a damn stylus at school too, so this is going to be a pain in the butt. But anyway, moist fringes or coastal marshes about 500 million years ago. Fishes were in the ocean before this happened. So water plants were in the water. Land plants hadn't made it to land, but we had vertebrates in the water at this time. So this is a relatively new movement. 500 million years ago, as you guys know, is around 1/9 or 11% of Earth's history. So they haven't been here the entire time like you might be thinking. They actually had to make their way, okay? So one of the important things to remember is that piece of natural selection, occasional drying. Plants that were living in environments that were moist but near the dry areas would have been a selective factor for those that could survive periodic drought. Okay, so just envision that for a moment. Just any plant that was getting more sunlight, less moisture, that could tolerate it, reproduce, all this fitness thing we've talked about all year. Okay, so this is kind of a vestige. We talked about vestigial structures. This plant here is something that would have kind of made its way near the fringes. And I can't verify that this is seaweed that you would get from a Japanese sushi restaurant, but it sure as heck looks like it to me. So these would have been living in the shallow waters at that time, pushing their way onto land. Okay. Now something to remember: what's an alga? Algae, plural; alga, singular, ALGA, versus a plant, right? So the thing that unifies them in our Venn diagram is this here: organic molecules via photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis is common to algae and plants. Everything else over here, all these features, those are independent to plants. So alternation of haploid and diploid generations, walled spores, gametangia. We're going to get to all this in a second. So let 25 million years pass, and we end up in a situation where it's 475 million years ago, and plants have been kicking ass. So sunlight is abundant on land, and also because plants hadn't really started to produce enough oxygen as land plants, they were doing it from the water, and there was oxygen in the atmosphere. There's a great deal of CO2. So sunlight and CO2 on land really opens the door for these guys to get out there and do the job that they're capable of, okay? Now this next slide covers some of the changes that would have occurred. I know this looks crazy and intimidating. There's lots of words that go with it. I'm going to talk over it as usual. That's usually in class where I end up finishing this presentation, so that's what we're going to do today. So just looking back through here, 4 adaptations had to really occur in all of plants, not just one group, but all the plants that made their way onto land. They really had to come into a conclusion of these 4 characteristics. So if you go from water to land, maintaining moisture is difficult. Resources come via roots for plants, and water plants at the time that this was occurring had no real root system. Plants had to stand upright. Buoyancy in the water is a heck of a lot better than standing up in air, so the water really supports a plant, which is, as you know, predominantly made of. Yep, this is not a pause on accident. What are plants predominantly made of? If you're saying water, good job, Blue's Clues, because that's what we are. We're predominantly made of water. Animals are predominantly made of water. Plants are predominantly made of water. The other factor they had to consider was how to reproduce on land. So those are the four major ideas that had to be overcome. All right. We're going to take a peek over here now. I can't circle this. I'm going to, instead of using the magic pen for now, I'm going to go with this. So we're going to be over here now. So algae, alga, singular. If you look in this area, water plants are supported by water. They don't have a real root system. They have something called a holdfast. But the majority of plant nutrients comes from absorption in the water. Minerals, the CO2, everything, it can move through the cells. Whereas land plants don't have that opportunity. So if we look, I'm going to go back to our magic pen. I want this to dissolve. If we look over here, that's what you use to understanding about roots. Nutrients come from the soil, right? Just going to delete this. Oh, for hell's sake. Boil. Oh, good grief. All right, not going to do that. This sucks. As you know, it sucks at home, right? You're smiling. Not perfect. I did that. So, algae. They're not going to do well on land because there's no root and they absorb from the water. If you don't have roots, you can't absorb from land. And there's no water surrounding you, right? Flagellated sperm is the other scenario that had to be overcome. These sperm swim through the water. They can't do that on land. So just like you would anticipate as a land animal, like a fish moved onto land, they were sort of hybrids. If you look at a fish moving onto land, it looks more like it's not good for the water, although it's okay. It's not really good for land. So right in here, when we get to the mosses, you're going to see they still have the flagellated sperm, which means they have to swim, right? But these are the first ones that have roots. So as the roots came up, they were able to overcome the moisture scenario of absorbing water from the soil as opposed to water from the surrounding water that they were living in. And then they also had to stick with these flagellated sperm. So they can only reproduce in scenarios where there's a great deal of water. And it's usually at this time where I ask, I pull up a picture or something. Where's the mosses picture? You'll see these around the house. You have to get real close, though. That little green patch of moss that you're accustomed to seeing, it looks like a mat. It's not this until you get really close to it. So this guy here in the center of the screen, this is not Spanish moss. They used to call him moss. This is actually true moss. Spanish moss is something called an angiosperm that we're going to get to in a bit, okay? So water actually falls in to the bottom of this area where these roots are, and then when the sperm leave, they fall into that water and they swim up. And we're going to see that again right about here, demonstrated in this area. Okay, that's the sperm swimming out. Rainfall, ambient moisture, even enough humidity could be a cause for these guys to be able to swim. All right. So overcoming the root situation, and they're still sticking with the sperm that came from the algae before them. Something else that is critical is no vascular tissue. So if you've been looking up here, vascular tissue is in us, arteries and veins. Well, these guys don't have it, which means they're very limited into how tall they can grow, and they're lacking a couple of molecules that make them stiff for standing up. Okay, so let's move over to our ferns here because I'm on minute 10. I'm about to start losing. Oh, see, watch what happens. Unless because I didn't complete the circle, we're going to be good. We're good. All right, maybe if I just do a partial circle. So ferns would have been in the Carboniferous, just kicking butt. Big tree ferns, small shrubs like the ones you see outside. Still, flagellated sperm still required moisture. So what these all three have in common, algae, mosses, and ferns, are the flagellated sperm, and they have to be very moist, very humid areas. They don't do well in arid, A-I-R-D, regions where it gets very dry, okay? But they have vascular tissue. You see this in red. And that was a big deal. because that makes them a little bit more robust. They can transport minerals, so they can become bigger, but still kind of minimized to the constraints that happened before them. Once we get over to these guys here, true trees, they have lignified cell walls, means they're stiff, solid roots, good vascular systems, and it says fertilization, not growth, but fertilization. So these dry seeds, after they've been pollinated, can fly without moisture from the top of the tree out to other areas. Now, moisture has to be in the soil for the seed to, there goes puberty again, for the seed to fertilize, germinate. The seed has to hit some moisture in the soil and has to have sunlight. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Looks like I didn't talk about stomata either. Those are the actual pores on the underside of leaves that allow for gas exchange. So when we talk about photosynthesis, let's pull this up. There's just little pores on the underside of leaves that where photosynthesis is either releasing oxygen or exchanging carbon dioxide with the atmosphere. I had a lab set up for this where y'all could see them on a leaf, but you know, you get. So that covers us for this slide. Those are the adaptations. Remember, maintaining moisture, obtaining resources, the root system, supporting the plant body, and then reproduction and dispersal. So I want to cover this a little bit. How do they stay dry now? Moist inside of a dry climate. So, you know, leaves on plants have generally a waxy cuticle. If you touch a leaf, it's a little bit thicker. That keeps the moisture in the plant. So once they get it from the roots, why does it not just leave the plant? Well, it tends to, but the cuticle minimizes this. The stomata, like we said, they open during the day during the photosynthesis, but the light-dependent reactions happen during the day. Light-independent reactions, they basically chill out at night and run their Krebs cycles, right? Resources, so roots, right? And then off the edges of roots, if you've ever pulled a weed out of the ground, you've got thicker roots and you get these thinner little filaments that come off the side. Those are the mycorrhiza. Photosynthetic leaves. So now they're up on the surface of the planet, not underwater. So the leaves become far more important at helping with this photosynthetic process. The region of the growth region of the apical meristem, vascular tissue we talked about. Xylem and phloem are for water and food. So nutrients that come through, and then sugars that come through that they're making actually for themselves. The nutrients from the soil that they need to make the sugars in the phloem. And then mosses, which don't think of Spanish moss, we're from Louisiana. These mosses here and here, okay? Things of this nature, algae and mosses, don't have a complete vascular network, and algae have a very minimal, if anything. So supporting the plant body, we mentioned the water piece, lignin, and again, mosses don't get tall because they're not lignified. Reproduction, you understand kind of the way that pollen works. It falls onto the female parts of the plant, and then the sperm swim down, fertilize the ovule. Gametangia are the cells that are responsible for making the gametes. So whether it's a seed that's been fertilized by sperm or the ovule that becomes the seed, those are gametangia, and those are found in these mosses, which actually don't have seeds at all. So using that term is appropriate only once we get to gymnosperms and angiosperms, because they don't exist here. They use spores and other structures. Okay, sperm swim, we mentioned that. Here comes the pollen, and then we talk about wind dispersal or animals. We'll talk about that later in the lesson. The zygote, which you guys know from a fertilized human embryo, is going to stay attached to the parent. So you can think of fruits as being the zygote. This alternation of haploid and diploid adult generations, we're going to talk about that when we get to that slide, but that's something that's pretty complex that I'll mention to you when we do life cycles, which is not ideal for this sort of format, which is why I want to go live. and then spores and seeds. Okay, so I'm going to crush it here after I mention this. The next time I want to try with you guys, let's see, FGAB, it's Wednesday. So first period Monday, we're going to try to do this live. Or in fact, if I have WebEx, I would actually like to try it. What is this? Today's Wednesday, FGAB. So CDEF. I'm going to put a link out there tomorrow around class time, and we're going to see if we can log in and give this a shot. And then you can text your friends and say, hey, go check the link that Coach Lindsay gave us, because then we can maybe I'll log on and try it. Y'all are still going to watch this video, and you're still going to work on your study guide here, but I want to see if we can try to all get on at the same time once a few of us are on. So look for a link in your email that's going to take you to an app called WebEx, and then we're all going to log in and see if we can communicate live. Okay. Oh, there's going to be some rules that come out too. What you're supposed to be wearing, what we can see on the camera, what you're supposed to say, all that good stuff. Okay. So we have to have all of our clothes on. You have to act appropriately. You can't have anything from your room in the background that you wouldn't want to see online. And then I'm going to talk to you guys about how we interject with each other in terms of if you have a question, what we're going to do there, and we'll figure it out. It's going to be fine. All right. See y'all soon. Well, I'm not going to see you soon, but maybe I will lay eyes upon your face through the internet. Sorcery. Bye.